Okay, good morning and welcome to Art Matters. We have two very wonderful guests today, Dr. Rukmini Banerji, who's the CEO of Pratham, and Ranade, who joined Pratham in 2018 and leads the Learning for Life domain. We worked extensively with Uma, and we would spend the next 45 minutes to an hour talking to Rukmini and Uma about education in general, arts and culture and heritage in particular, and how the two can be woven together to enhance the educational experience and the outcomes with a universe of children and young adults who Pratham does address. Just to give you a quick background, Dr. Banerjee is the CEO of Pratham Foundation, Education Foundation. She has extensive field experience working directly with rural and urban communities, as well as in designing and implementing large-scale partnerships with governments for improving learning of elementary school-age children. Specifically, from 2015 to 14, she led Pratham's research and assessment efforts, including the well-known ASA, Annual Status of Education Report, which is always considered a seminal contribution to the understanding of the education landscape in India. In 2021, Dr. Banerjee was awarded the Gidan Prize for Education Development. She writes frequently on education in both Hindi and English and enjoys creating stories for children. So welcome, Rukmini. Uma Ranade joined Pratham in 2018 and leads the Learning for Life domain, which focuses on building 21st century skills, promotes physical and mental well-being, and creates environmental consciousness among children and youth for a sustainable future. She holds a Master's of Arts degree in Media and Cultural Studies from TIS and a Master's in Sociology from Mumbai University. Uma started a career as an assistant director in the Marathi film industry and soon turned to her lifelong passion for teaching. Prior to joining Pratham, she taught media-related subjects for nearly 10 years in some of the most reputed colleges in Mumbai and in the Middle East. Welcome, Uma, and happy to have both of you here today. I'm going to start with you, Rukmini. What is India's education challenge?
So, big question, and you want a brief answer. So I look at it in sort of three parts. And, our name is Pratham. So we are largely about Prathamik education, elementary or primary or elementary or even pre-primary. I'm not at all experienced to say anything that happens for the older children. Uma has much more experience working with colleges and high schools, so she may be able to address it. But I would say largely in our, up to the age of, say, 14 or 16, I see this in three parts. One part, which I think has been, very uniquely put into our new education policy, which is what happens to the early childhood all the way up to the first and second grades, which is now being considered the foundation stage. Next would be, I would say, up to fifth, which is sort of the primary, it's called the preparatory stage. And then the upper primary or the middle school age group, which takes us all the way up to class 8. Now, each of these three segments, I think, have their own challenges. Age 3 to age 8 building foundations, we believe, and I think the new education policy also believes, that if you build the foundations well, you can go very far and you can do many things. So challenge number one is, how do we build these foundations well? And since the education policy was launched and since COVID got over and schools opened again, we see a lot of concerted effort from state governments on building these early grades well. Next comes the, say, class 3 to class 5, where I believe that there is some catch up to be done. If you don't have your basic foundations in place, we need to get those in place. We need to get classrooms and teachers and children operating in more ways that they can learn, not just from the textbooks from outside. And then I would say the upper primary age and beyond is where we like to think of it as beyond basics, where I think, in the pre-primary and primary, to some extent, I feel like we know what to do. We have to get it done. But I think as you get to class 6 and above, I think we have to also revision what do we want our kids to be able to do. And I think that's the space in which Uma and her team are working. And I think you all are working as well. That is not to say that broadening of horizons is not required in the early grades. But there, I think the breadth of skills is a lot of skills which prepare kids to be able to do more before. Manish Sabarwal, who's a well-known person in the, in the field of labor and a commentator on social issues, he puts it very crisply. He says, for human development, we need 3 things in India: prepare, repair, and upgrade. But I think we need one more, which is widen. And I think that widening to learn from things which are around us, things which are not necessarily in our books, is an essential component. So I see this not just as challenges, I see this as opportunities. And I'd like to say that the new education policy, at least up to the elementary stage, opens these possibilities for people to try things and be able to bring out, models and mechanisms for how they can work on scale.
All right. I'm going to ask you a quick follow-up question, which is, of course, to draw on the ESSA report, the latest one. What are the positives that have come out of that latest assessment in terms of, things that have happened well for the country?
So the latest one, ESSA 2023, which we launched a couple of weeks ago, is a gap year ESSA. Our usual ESSA covers all rural districts and focuses largely on basic reading and math. This one has done 1 district per state, and we look in some depth at the age group 14 to 18, which I believe is a relatively, we don't look at that age group for its own sake. Now, what we see is that we know that up to age 14, enrollment in India is very high. That's up to the mandatory level. Compulsory education under our right to education is up to age 14. But this year's ESSA, based just on 28 districts, shows that young people up to the age of 18, very, very large numbers, are still enrolled in some kind of an educational institution, high school, college, or any other kind. Now, that to me is a very positive sign, because if you have young people enrolled somewhere, you can reach them more easily. When they're scattered outside institutions, it's a lot harder to get to them. So I would say that is one very positive one. And we see indications that people want to remain in the education system, at least up to college level. Whether they're able to do so today or not, depends somewhat on family background. The second very positive thing we saw was that I think to this, young people's relationship with technology and digital resources. And I think COVID has to be given a lot of credit for India's connection to the digital economy, along with increasing connectivity and how you have to do a lot of daily things these days very easily on a phone. So we see that in the population that we sampled, this age group, almost over 90% have a smartphone in the family. Somebody has a smartphone. Most of them are able to access this smartphone for some of the time. They are able to do a lot of basic things on the smartphone. Now, ownership of the smartphone for this age group, boys, about 40% or so of boys own their own smartphone. And this is a rural survey. And less than half of the girls own it. Now, as we go beyond, we see that we do 2 things. One is self-reported, what can you do? And one is we ask kids to do some things as well with a cell phone. Both of these, we see that on basic navigating, finding things you want, a lot of young people can do this, whether their educational levels are or their learning levels are high or not. Largely, they're going and looking at entertainment of different types, and much less are doing sort of services like filling forms and so on. Again, the age group may be an issue here. What I take away from this is the fact that there is a real digital backbone in this country. Could be that it's at a very surface level right now. Kids are finding what they like as opposed to what they should have. But I think we can deepen what they like, expose them to many more things. And while for a younger age group, you may need face-to-face, instruction, I think this age group deals a lot with its own interests. So how do you widen this interest? And through the interest, how do you bring in a lot of other things? Maybe a real positive angle that we take away from this year's ESSA. One last thing I would say is, we see the big gender difference in what kids can do, what young people can do with their devices, except if you compare boys who own their own cell phones, smartphones, with girls who own their own smartphones, then there is no difference. So if you have your own phone, you're equal. If you're depending on somebody else's phone, then the inequality comes in.
Okay. So there is a bit of a conundrum there in terms of, the opportunity that such a large penetration allows. But do we worry that at some point you're creating two groups of the haves and the have-nots? Because we saw that in one of our education initiatives during COVID. Initially, everyone had access to some kind of device. Half of them, about 40% of them had a smartphone, and a few didn't, and then a few didn't have access. But that was a very small number to any device. And then a model that catered to the three groups started to evolve. But it did create a little bit of a divide in the ones who didn't have, because there we had to reach a physical resource. And now, of course, some of that we are bridging through broadband over satellite. Luckily, we have a group company in the Hindujas where I work, which does that. But is that an issue?
So here's what I would say, that one is that if I look at what young people do on the phone, entertainment, studying, and services, like you see on the entertainment, there's quite a big gap, because I think if you have your own phone, then you go and search and find and so on. For what the phone is used for in terms of learning or studies, no gender difference, which means that I think if a cell phone has to be borrowed from somebody in the family, education is given a high priority. Now, I think it is up to us to define what education means. Today, education is studying for exams, looking at textbooks, looking at tutorials. But if you widen that horizon, so I think that it is for people like us who believe that you can learn from many places and that education is about all of this. I think then we can open up and say that if something is important to do, has high stakes, then the family or whoever it is that has a cell phone allows you to use it. The other thing is, I think ownership will increase. Today, the boys have it more. There could be some social norms behind it. But as Uma, I'm sure, will say, we do a lot of work with groups of children. So individually, you may or may not have a device. You may be dependent on someone in the family. But if there's a group activity, a group sharing of what comes through the smartphone could have a big equalizing influence. So we are believers in sort of, device libraries, not that we've established them, but I think the idea is that if there is something that you can share, whether it's one person's phone that other people can see things that come off it or be able to. So I think there are ways around this. And I do feel that things are changing quite quickly. 10 years ago, girls were given cycles. Maybe today, girls should be given smartphones. Things are going to happen. And we need to be ready for that.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So if a government program to gift kids a smartphone is introduced, the multiplier is huge, right?
Yes.
Brings me to you, Uma. Pratham Digital. You started that some time back. And how has the journey been, given this backdrop of increasing access, and the variety of stuff kids are doing with phones now?
Absolutely. So I joined Pratham in 2018, and I think the Pratham Digital Initiative started a couple of years earlier than that. So I joined the journey halfway. We started, the program that we launched was called hybrid learning. So we knew right from the beginning that digital intervention along with a hands-on activity and learning by doing was the principle on which we based this. This was in 2015-16, where EdTech had not become such a popular term, when smartphones and internet had not really penetrated into the rural areas as it is today. And so the experiment or the learning was more on what kind of impact will this digital intervention have on children's learning, and not necessarily just the grades in school. But while doing this, and because it was a new exposure, we worked on three things: building a social network within the community of parents, of youngsters in the community, along with Sarpanch, was as important as building digital infrastructure. And back then, I think Pratham gave tablets or digital devices directly into the hands of children. And what we saw is there is an innate curiosity in children when it comes to not just learning, but also handling the device, right? Totally new device, foreign to them. And a lot of children had actually gone beyond what we had expected or had asked them to do. Some of them even changed the password onto the device so that Pratham employees could not, I mean, our field team could not access it. Some had, along with Pratham's own content, which was given to them. And this is when we didn't have access to internet, right? Not as much. So we had preloaded content, learning content on the devices. So children had downloaded their own favorite movies and games. They had figured out how to use the camera and started creating their own videos and role plays. So there was definitely, right from the beginning, we understood that digital technology or intervention should not be looked at as a one-way communication, definitely should not be looked at as replicating a classroom or simply digitizing what is given in the textbook. But the technology itself has enough potential to be explored, to engage children as content creators and active learners rather than just passive receivers. And I mean, because we were working on creating our own digital library and audio videos, it helped us during the pandemic when India was under lockdown and schools were shut down, where Pratham could actually help governments and other organizations, or could, open up its content for others to use, especially during school shutdown. And we ran an entire campaign called Corona Thodi Masti Thodi Padhai, which was both a WhatsApp and a SMS campaign. What Rukmini said, right? Even if the child doesn't have access, somebody in the family, somebody in the community, if they have access to smartphone, can they enable children to learn better in more creative way? And so that's how it went.
It's lovely. Just kind of rang a bell while you were talking about how the children, the innate curiosity, because Prime Minister Modi has been laying emphasis on improving the quality of primary education, and they've introduced the initiative of Atal Tinkering Labs, and this kind of speaks directly to that capacity for kids to self-teach as much as we download content and we help them along. Facilitation with devices also means they learn on their own quite a bit by just the process of experimenting and experimentation. You introduced a few years ago an arts-based curriculum into the Prodigy initiative also. So there has been a lot of talk about language skills, numeracy skills, and then there's been a lot of talk about the many other soft skills, do-it-yourself skills. Typically in India, if a bulb gets fused, you call in somebody to fix it, right? While in many other countries of the world, everybody just get up and fix it on their own. So that attempt at doing things on your own and building your self-confidence. So what place do you find for all those activities that typically go beyond the conventional language and numeracy?
Yeah. So art interventions or art-based activities, Pratham has been employing them for many years, right? Whether it is music, whether it is body movement, dance, poetry, even when talking about or focusing on basic numeracy and literacy. The art-based curriculum, I think, that you are referring to is what we started developing under the Learning for Life domain somewhere around 2018 or so. And it again goes back to our experiences of the hybrid learning program. We saw this curiosity and creativity among children. We saw it come to surface during COVID, when we were reaching through Corona Thodi Masti Thodi Padhai. And what happens is the general perception towards art is either it's a hobby or it's always a means to achieve some other end, right? So we wanted to treat art as an end in itself. Why can't we look at music as a form of education or as a form of knowledge? And it was actually Madhav, who's a very good singer himself, said that, we should do something around music. Folk art, visual art, theater, music are such integral part of our Indian culture as well, but never really looked at as a form of education beyond textbook. So I think that's where the entire thought of building something around art, different creative arts, came about. And because we were working with or focusing on children between the age of 11 to 14, we also promoted project-based learning and group learning through these activities. So how do we build creativity? How do we build 21st century skills of critical thinking, collaboration, and communication? I think that is what we were trying to, or are still trying to do, and learn as we do it through our different art activities. As you can imagine, there was no problem engaging children or getting them excited in these activities. But I remember a bit of resistance from parents when we launched the first music activity in 2019. It was a musical survey. All children had to do was they went door to door asking people, can you sing or can you play an instrument? And created videos of this. So there was digital skill involved, there were soft skills involved. You were talking to people and gathering a huge repository of local music. And parents were saying कि ये क्या कर रहे हैं बच्चे, आपने तो बोला था पढ़ाई करेंगे, ये time pass कर रहे हैं आप. So for our implementation team on ground, they had to actually convince parents saying कि नहीं, this is also education, this is also knowledge. And that exercise very interestingly gave a platform and a chance for a lot of mothers and grandmothers in the house, grandmothers who had probably never gone to school, to get on a camera and sing a lullaby that they knew or sing a bhajan that they knew. And and children were saying that this is important, we are going to make a video of this, right? So these kind of learnings have been what drives our team. And it's always a challenge. How do you nudge more children? How do you give a push to their creativity, right? So it's the digital learning resources are more like an exposure to what the world could be or the variety that is out there, and with an element of exploration of their surroundings, exploration of self. So it goes hand in hand.
If I can add, so, the kinds of experiments that Uma and her team have been doing, and actually calling them experiments is wrong because they happen on quite large scale. The rest of Pratham, even those who are working with the early childhood or the elementary, take up. So, for example, we have started some new work for the age group 0 to 3 children. But obviously, we are not working with the 0 to 3 children. We are working with their mothers. And very recently, and Uma, I haven't even shared this with you, these groups are from different parts, from Gujarat, from Odisha, from parts of Maharashtra. And they are now doing a collection of traditional lullabies on one side, which I hope we can cut as an album saying, Bachcho ke liye or something. Traditional ones, not ones that you hear in movies. And the second that they are doing is collecting traditional recipes for chota babies. So I think connecting to your own surroundings, your own context, reaching through, like Uma said, to your grandparents, because I worry that we will lose a lot of the richness we have in the rush to be modern. And you can still be modern and still sing good songs that your grandmother sang. So, that's one kind. Another kind that I think, again, we've learned from COVID, from the work that Uma and team have been doing, that to spread things in a wide way, there are some simple ways, right? So we ran a large summer camp last summer to help kids who were going from 5th to 6th, who were still quite weak with their fundamentals. And we ran it through the main backbone of this campaign, which was in 3 states. The goal was every village in Bihar, UP, and Madhya Pradesh. So, huge number of villages, and run through volunteers. We got something like 3 lakh volunteers who joined. And the idea was that a story will go every day, an audio story by WhatsApp. And what you have to do as a volunteer is play the story, tell the story to your children. And then they'll do a little bit of vocabulary work and so on. But you have to visualize the story. Visualize it in terms of performance. Visualize it in however it comes out. And I traveled widely in these 3 states last summer. Every single spot was full of artwork. An artwork that we never provided any color, any material. We just provided what Uma says, the nudge to say, banao, and har ek ka alag hona chahiye. Because we're different people. And so your visualization of the story or the part of the story that you like. Now we are, so-called good at measurement, but we measure the improvement in reading. I wish we could have measured the improvement in how children visualize things. And with the textbook, the combination of the visualization and the performance, even when I went, let's say 20 days into the camp, children could tell me about every single story that they had worked on. So I think these are small things, but they are big things.
Yeah.
And because it was summer, perhaps parents didn't object to say time waste ho raha hai. But I don't think this is time waste. I think bringing in these into a natural part of our working, even with the younger children, is very possible.
Yes. In fact, I think one of the big things is the ecosystem support, so parents, community, elder children, like when we did some work in Jawar Taluk in Palghar, we found in many places the best support came from the elder children, who were very happy to kind of teach some of the younger ones. So you have the platform digitally, you have now the understanding of the players and who kind of contributes to the overall development and well-being. When you talk arts, Uma, how do you establish the benefits? What is it that you're trying to achieve, and how do you establish that it's happening?
Good question. What we are trying to achieve, like I said, so right now, post-pandemic, based on all the learnings and experiences of the past, currently we have launched something called as the Pratham Creativity Club. It is a program that we target to take to about 10,000 villages across India this year, and we are very close to achieving that target. And it has its own structure called All, Some and Few, where the idea is that at the all level, you give challenges and nudges to children with an element of choice. I think that's very important because currently our formal education system doesn't give any agency of choice to children, right? So here they have multiple themes that they can choose from. Those who show interest and show some kind of caliber are then promoted or taken to a one-day workshop at the some level. And then a smaller number is taken to a two-day immersive camp or an experience where they are connected with an external organization or experts. So what we are trying to promote through this or trying to achieve through this are the 21st century skills, whether it is creativity, collaboration, and so on. And so the Pratham Creativity Club program gives us a very wide scope to not just look at visual art, music, but also to incorporate mathematics and science. Like, to give you an example, the all-level prompt this year for a mathematical activity was to gather household objects that you find around you and arrange them in such a way that when you project a shadow onto a wall, that shadow should have some kind of image or some kind of a shape. And we saw children projecting faces, creating forts, creating other things through it. Another thing that is happening as we speak right now is children exploring. We are taking children to Jaipur and Udaipur to see the local forts there, because the idea is, how can you make history more interesting through India's monuments and talk about cultural, geographical, historical diversity. So art in itself as an expression, as a medium, or just to get to play with different materials, that is one goal. The other is, how do you promote 21st century skills? Everyone keeps talking about that, but how do you actually achieve those? And when it comes to assessment, there is no single agreed upon measurement across the world. Everyone has their own tools and devices. What we are doing currently is that on our Pratham Creativity Club portal, we have received more than 10,000 entries so far. And we actually go through every entry, which is in the form of a photo or a video, and conduct artifact analysis. And with a smaller group, we conduct focused group discussions to understand what is it that children are taking back with them, right? what are the experiences. And we have seen that those children who come for a 2-day camp go back with so many things to talk about, that the next time we go into the community, we don't really have to convince anybody, right? They have already shared their experiences. They have taken their artifacts with them to show their parents. And there is enough buzz and excitement created around the activity.
Uma, you want to talk about the moon challenge?
Oh yeah. So recently we did a challenge called Message to the Moon, where children had to draw or create artworks. And we received how many, 40, 50,000 artworks or even more, out of which some were to be selected to actually be sent on a spaceship.
Some mooncraft of NASA. That part we don't know so well. But this challenge to say, what would you like to send to the moon, was like wildfire everywhere, because everybody wanted to send their own message to the moon.
Yeah, it's so interesting, no?
Can I add one more thing to this? The collaboration that we are doing with Sarmaya at the moment around numismatics. So, I mean, we started developing content around numismatics because I heard Paul talk about it once, and I was extremely fascinated and saw some of the artifacts in Sarmaya Museum. And we created a series of videos. The way we approached children, or the way we approached this program, was a very simple challenge was given. Draw your own coin or design your own coin. And what would you put on it, right? More than 3,000 entries came our way, and about 150 odd children attended the 2-day camp. Now, the camp was designed around price of precious, which is a quite complex and abstract concept to talk about. But we were very keen on doing this with children. Sarmaya team was involved in conducting these camps, and a little apprehensive or a little nervous to conduct entire 2-day session in pure Hindi, because I'd said Bombaya Hindi nahi chalega and English to pakka nahi chalega. But I'm very happy that the team is now super confident in conducting in Hindi. Here we were talking to children, these were children from rural areas of Madhya Pradesh and UP who had probably come out of the house alone for the first time. So coming to a foreign location, meeting children from other villages and interacting, sharing ideas and creative expression in itself is a big deal. And we were talking about museums, and there was a blank expression on everyone's face. So I said, "Ki aapko pata hai museum ko Hindi mein sangrahalay kehte hain? Koi gaya hai sangrahalay?" None of the 150 children who were at the camp had ever visited a museum. And only 3-4 of them said, "Humne suna hai iske bare mein." So it was quite a challenge for us, but we took it on. And I'm very happy to say that at the end of the 2-day workshop, from a basic coin design, we were able to, talk about price of precious, and children were able to define and identify what educational value, what knowledge value means, what cultural value means, what economical value means. There was a photo of Zakir Hussain playing tabla, and we asked, what kind of value is this? So they said cultural value hai kyunki tabla baja raha hai. Somebody said educational value because he could be teaching his students as well. And someone said economical value hai. So हमने पूछा कैसे? शो करेंगे, टिकट लगाएंगे तो पैसे भी तो मिलेंगे.
Really.
A small activity opened up such a large canvas for us to, discuss with children, that it was absolutely mesmerizing to watch.
Yeah.
This videos, Paul, have been seen by a lot of people. So we were, Uma was also there. We had this whole discussion with Bihar Museum in Patna.
Yeah.
Amazing collection. And they're now waiting to put their collection into the Pratham Sarmaya video series that they could also use. So Uma, we have that waiting to be done. Right?
No, Rukmini and Uma, I mean, the backstories that can be, told is in itself a fascinating area. But more than that is also the thoughts you leave behind. The first time we ever did this Price of Precious program was in Bangalore. And that was done with actual young adults who were corporate work, in the workforce. And they'd come into the room and we asked them to empty their pockets. And they had, big photographs, cards, keys, bike, this, credit cards, the works, cash. And then we said, you can pick one object, which is the most precious.
Oh.
And that, everyone was kind of, wondering what to do. And then the stories as to why they did it. So somebody picked up his mom's photo and he said that, her memory is always, something that will stay. That's why I find that. So there's nostalgia. Somebody said, listen, I have to enter my home. The home key is most important. Somebody else said, my, bike key is most important. Key gives me mobility. And then the discussion moved very quickly to how do you respect people's choices, and what drives the definition of precious. And everyone has different criteria and different elements. And, from starting where we were to this whole journey of, allowing people to think that through, so that there's no need for judgment. People will choose differently. There are reasons why they choose and all of that. So it was fascinating. And I think, I wish literally, Uma, agreeing with what you said, that at the end of the day, seeing those children carrying back these thoughts, which of those ones have embedded and which have, they are processing would be lovely to know, because so,
One idea that I have had, and we've done a little bit of work on it, not that much, is imagine a map of India and with whatever we have, I don't know how many million villages we have, but the history of the name of every village found out by children. So, for example, we do this quite often, and you have to really hunt because many people in the village don't know where the name came from. And usually it ends up with a couple of stories, estimates of what it may have been. And it started, my interest in this started because I was traveling in Bihar, in rural Bihar, and there was a village called English.
Oh.
Okay, so we went to this village. I was visiting the school. In the school, nobody knew where the name came from because the teachers were from somewhere else and the children had not been curious about this. So everybody stepped out to say, ki, mohalle mein logo se puchte hain. It turned out that the school was right in front of a adda of like a liquor adda. Okay. So those people were not very useful because they were all drunk. But one of them said, अंग्रेजों के जमाने में कोई अंग्रेज आकर यहाँ पे रहा होगा इसलिए हमारे गांव का नाम इंग्लिश है. But I imagine that you can click anywhere in India. The government has a website called UDICE, which gives the school ka number and enrollment and whatnot. I want to suggest to the government कि आप वहाँ पे एक something लगा दो that the children of that school have found out, and you can update it. It could be like a wiki name that somebody has written. I think that gets to how do you find out, what do you ask, who do you ask, and I don't think any such thing has been done. It would be a great exercise to do to see whether it leads to something wonderful as I imagine it could.
In fact, even in the art space, if you look at it, there's a lovely compendium, Ranjan and Ranjan, where kind of details the inventory. But if you travel in India, you see we've traveled to Bengal, Orissa, and there is some of us have a perception of the one art form that is predominant. And then you go there and you find that literally every 50 kilometers, there's something which is interesting, unique, and all of that. In fact, just like this name to build a repository of India's art forms, when we do, for example, leather puppets, when I first started getting involved in the leather puppets, it was believed by me to be an Andhra Pradesh-centric activity. And then we discovered that it's all the way up to Orissa, Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, Telangana, Kerala, and how each of them is based on a different version of the Ramayana. And each of them, some of them are public performance based. And in Kerala, it is unique because it faces off to the deity in the temple, and the performance is for the deity, and public are not supposed to see it. So why did that happen? And apparently the deity missed the final battle in the Ramayana between Ram and Ravan. And she was very upset. And so this was a way of placating her, performing the Ramayana for her to see in private. Fascinating stories, And so I think that perspective and exposure, Uma, I, I think that is precious, literally, giving it to the kids out there. So where are we going with this, Uma? What is the intended audience? What is the coverage? We recently had gone, Rukmini, I don't know if you know, we had gone to Kanpur and Gaya on this program. And now we are covering some of the parts in Maharashtra and Damoh and Kolhapur and all of that. We just found it absolutely amazing to see the kids, in their little groups working away. And, we put out all these objects and asked them to assess them and understand what they were. And the kind of variety, it was just amazing that, the kids they were not overwhelmed to see an object for the first time. And at the same time, they had ideas about what it possibly could be. And then, of course, working with it and, through the program.
So based on our learning from the previous Price of Precious activity, this time we have added an element of children creating their own pop-up museum. And the museum is called Museum of Play.
Ah.
So every child is supposed to think about what they play with and draw that object, put it up in a museum-like structure so that there is some format to the and some arrangement to the way they put up their exhibit, and come up with name tags. So that's an activity which is going on as we speak. Paul, to answer your question, I think there is just so much of possibilities that one can do under art that sometimes it is fascinating. Sometimes we just get overwhelmed with what to do and how much to do, right? So there's definitely, this kind of art integrated education, art-based activities, whether to improve foundational numeracy and literacy, whether to improve understanding of environment science, along with art in itself being, the end in itself. I think there is lots more to be done. We plan to expand Pratham Creativity Club in communities as well as in schools. That's happening as we speak. Learn as we go and modify it if required. Within Pratham also integrating what Learning for Life is doing with what other programs are doing. How do we merge art, music with other activities? And mainly, I think it's very important, and we have been doing it, create a collaboration or an alliance of like-minded individual artists, organizations like Sarmaya to come together and put our best foot forward, bring our expertise, and create something for the children of India. So this year's target, like I said, is about 10,000 communities. We are very close to achieving that, saying that Creativity Club, sorry?
I said it'll be wider than that in the coming year. Integrating these experiences into the bigger Pratham landscape is on the cards. So.
Totally. And now that Rukmini said it, it's going to happen.
I think also, Paul, the points that you were making, this respecting of choices, if you have to choose, appreciation of different things, I think these need to come into the bedrock of our thinking, that there are many ways to do certain things. There are many forms that, things can take. And I feel like, in some ways, the textbook gives a boundary to what is okay and not okay, or at least what is important in school or otherwise. So I think that all of these efforts are going to widen our children's view of the world, and that the world is a big and, amazing place, and you can find it. It doesn't have to be given to you in a particular way. I don't know how one measures these things, but I think these are even more important today than ever before. And how do you do it as a group of individuals who may be quite different from each other, whether you are in the same mohalla or across villages, or all of this exposure, I think is, fundamental to creating a stronger fabric on which we can, go forward.
On that note, Rukmini, I'm going to leave both of you. Sarmaya is absolutely delighted with this partnership. We've evolved over the years. I remember we started with just being a content provider for, downloading into the tabs which the kids had in their little clusters, to now being actually on the ground and doing this layered approach of all, few, and all, some, and few. And we are, also constantly learning, and our team is equally excited when they travel out. Some of them were so apprehensive, saying, Hindi. We said, absolutely. So you're trying to tell kids about being open and receptive. You have to be open and receptive to start with, right? Otherwise, you can't do that.
Can I add a funny thing to this? So this time we are expanding in Maharashtra, right? And I think only one of the team members is Marathi speaker. So the other two said, Hindi hum manage kar lenge, Marathi ka ab thoda sa problem hai.
Yes, we did that, In the past, we've attempted taking the same object and having team members speak in their own vernacular. And it was really amazing. There were one or two who were so good with the language in terms of using fairly complex terms, etc., in the vernacular. And there were others where it was clearly the equivalent of English, because they were comfortable with their language, but in the colloquial forms. And when there was a technical term, they would just instantly switch to English. But yes, I mean, it's just fabulous. And I think, what you're doing is wonderful, Uma and Rukmini. And we are very delighted to be a part of this in whatever way we can. And we look forward to this also, like you said, being a bedrock for true education, in terms of the many softer processes that we must retain to become confident adults. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time.
All from our side as well. I think this is the kind of partnership we look to, which grows based on each other's experiences. And then that's why we feel that, we are open, and then we can see how far we can go with. So thank you so much for having us as well.
Delight, pleasure. Bye-bye.